sometime around 1993, 1994, my friend Marcelo told me, you have to meet this wonderful Rabbi Chaim Seidler Feller. Marcelo had met him in Los Angeles, where Chaim was the director of Hillel at UCLA. You have to meet him. He's a little crazy, but he is Torah. He's very deep, and he's a wonderful, warm person. And we met in my office back then in 93, 94, and I must say that it was a gift that Marcelo gave me, because we have forged a long time, beautiful friendship, and I have looked up to him for guidance and advice and for Torah many, many, many times over the years. And he has been teaching at BJ every single year since then, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. He's come here to teach his beautiful Torah, except during the couple of COVID years, but he has never failed, and his Torah has become relevant. He has retired from UCLA. He's now Director Emeritus or Rabbi Emeritus of Hillel UCLA. But as the Torah says, Lo kahata eno velo laslecho. His vision never dimmed, and I'm not talking about his physical vision. His vision never dimmed, velo naslecho, and he's full of vigor. His energy never waned. He's full of vigor and continues to teach and to create, always thinking new ideas and always ahead. And those of us who were here just a few weeks ago for the conference of Smol Emuni that happened in this sanctuary just a few weeks ago before Pesach, heard him and heard the powerful message that he delivered. And always Torah has to be ethical and moral, and Israel has to be ethical and moral, and the Jewish people has to be ethical and moral, and that's what the essence of Torah. And we have really treasured his teachings. So we're very happy, Felicia and I, that he's with us this Shabbat. We'll also be teaching in the afternoon. The session in the afternoon is called a return, what is it? A return to a Zionism for the future. And he has prepared a number of very interesting sources, so you may want to come back at 5:30 this afternoon in the chapel to continue to study with him. So just briefly, Rabbi Chaim Seidler Feller was ordained in 1971 at Yeshiva University, and he's a lecturer in the departments of sociology and Near Eastern studies, Near Eastern languages and cultures at UCLA, in the Department of Theological Studies at Loyola Marymount University. He's also a faculty member of the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem and the Wexner Heritage Foundation. He's a founding member of Americans for Peace Now. He got many awards, but particularly from the Hillel, International Hillel Center, an award for blending the love of Jewish tradition with a modern intellectual approach of the university. And Chaim and I have been working for the last few years on a project called A Land for All, which is a project of Confederation of Israel-Palestine. You may want to look at the website of A Land for All. It's a very interesting proposition, and not for tomorrow, not for next year, but hopefully one day. And so it's my privilege to welcome my dear friend, Chaim Seidler Feller, Rabbi, Morenu Verabenu.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Okay. Seder. I'd like to begin with a biography of this Dvar Torah. Over the past week, I've been grappling with the question of what would be the focus of my drasha this Shabbat. After all, it's the Shabbat between Yom HaShoah, Yom HaAtzmaut, and on top of that, there are a range of most interesting topics in the Parsha. Kashrut, for example. We did that once, if you remember, but maybe you don't. Rabbi can always repeat, count on it. The death of Nadav and Avihu, and Aaron's silence in the face of the tragedies, the death of his sons. The significance of the eighth day, Bayom HaShmini, the day after creation, with parallels to the creation story and the linguistic ties between the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden, and the Mishkan. Think cherubs, Kruvim, both garden and in the Mishkan and the temple. What was most poignant for me was Moses' ability, after 7 days of effectively functioning as the priest, as the one who trained Aaron and family in the tasks of priesthood, to just step away and never again be permitted to enter the inner precincts that were reserved for the descendants of his brother. This constituted a sharp separation of powers, we could use that, between Aaron, the priestly director of access to the divine sanctuary, and Moshe, the educator, legislator, prophet. Aaron was in charge of the fixed temple ritual, God's Makom, while Moses translated the divine into the dynamic, ever-changing human realm. But beyond the separation, which the rabbis further developed into the primacy of the Talmid Chacham, that is, they asserted that human reason supersedes revelation, there are two other fascinating dimensions to Moses' behavior and Moses' handover to Aaron. One is the obvious conclusion that the priesthood is merely a functional role and not one inherent to the Aaronite family. That is, our priests are not inherently sacred. There is nothing especially holy about them. They only perform sacred rites. The other is, and more importantly for me at this juncture, is Moses' true humility. He simply steps back from temple mastery and the presence of God, the kavod, and lets go so that he can serve his people as their leader and guide in all the moral messiness that governance entails. But after reaching this point, I was still dissatisfied. Something was missing. I felt uneasy. How could I get lost in this engaging spiritual teaching when the world around us is burning, being consumed, not by divine fire, but by human destruction, political chaos, and brutal warfare? Then Tuesday, at the gym, I had an aha moment. I just want you to know that I go to the gym. That's it took 70 years. Problems, okay. I noticed an item on the CNN news scroll indicating that the Pope, Zichrono Livracha, had written a posthumously published article entitled, "The Bloodshed in Palestine, Israel Must End." That was it. There was the link. V'ha'ish Moshe anav ma'od. That man, Moses, was exceedingly humble, and that man, Il Papa, too, was exceedingly humble. And in death, he was speaking to us. Let me share some of what he wrote. He said, "The cycle of violence and retribution has become so embedded in the human psyche that even invoking peace can be interpreted with suspicion as leniency toward the enemy, or as a lack of empathy for the perceived victims. Peacemaking requires courage, much more so than warfare. War only gives the illusion of setting things right, but it is never a solution. Security can never be achieved through the dominion, annihilation, humiliation, or exclusion of the other. When the illusion of war has passed, only death, destruction, and even greater problems remain. Weaving peace involves more time, more patience, but it is the only path to a better world. True peace cannot be imposed by force, but can be built slowly and gradually through sincere dialogue, mutual respect, and an honest commitment to the common good. He continued, supporting a two-state solution means recognizing that independence must walk hand in hand with interdependence. We need shalom, he said, the divine peace, the only peace that really has a human face. This is the only peace that allows people to see each other as neighbors, as partners, and even as brothers and sisters. May the days soon come when swords are turned into plowshares, when children wake not to sirens, but to songs of peace, and when the Holy Land becomes truly holy. Amen. I had my experience with holiness. A number of years ago, I was asked by a friend of mine, Eddie Kaufman, to come with him on a tour of coexistence projects in Haifa. And I had the time, so I spent the day with him. At the end of the day, he asked me to say a few words, so I turned to the group and I said, I just came from Jerusalem. They tell me that Jerusalem is the holy city. But what I discovered today is that the holy city was Haifa. In Jerusalem, there's divisiveness. There's confrontation. There's protest. In Haifa, there are projects where people are working together and changing the reality. Maybe that's the moment, the focus of holiness in the Holy Land. But the encounter with the Pope's flowing compassion was not the end of my journey in my drasha. For then I turned to the Haftarah. And aside from Uzzah also getting zapped and dying, and David whirling and leaping before the ark, we will read of David's desire to build a house for God, the Mikdash, and God's pointed denial. Ha'ata tivne li bayit l'shivti? Are you the one to build a house for me to dwell in? Here was the lesson. Why was it that David's deepest yearning was thwarted? The explanation is not provided in our reading from Shmuel, from Samuel, but in the retelling in 1 Chronicles, chapter 22. Quote, and David said to Solomon his son, as for me, it was in my heart to build a house for the name of the Lord my God. For the name of the Lord, very interesting, for the name of the Lord. But the word of the Lord came to me, saying, blood in abundance you have shed, and you fought great battles. You shall not build a house for my name, for you have shed much blood on the earth before me. Look, a son is to be born to you, for Solomon shall be his name, and peace and quiet I will bestow on Israel in his days. He is the king of peace. He it is who shall build a house for my name. Why is David disqualified as the builder? Because he's tainted. He's taken the lives of many on the battlefield. And we all heard the directive in Exodus. Should you make me an altar of stones, Exodus 20, you shall not build them of hewn stones, for your sword you would brandish over it and profane it. As per Rashi, the altar was created to lengthen a person's days, and iron was created to shorten one's days. It is not fit that the means of shortening should be brandished over the means of lengthening. David wielded the iron sword. He cannot build the Mikdash. The temple is the Creator's house, the house of life, and the Chayut, the life force, flows from it. It is therefore defiled and compromised by death, counter, by the way, Egyptian culture, where the task of the priest was to prepare the dead for their journey into the next world, for their eternity. But this is puzzling that David was disqualified. Wasn't David commanded to go to war? Wasn't he either fulfilling God's mandate or fighting a battle of self-defense? Why should he then suffer the consequences of these actions? It seems to me that although there are times when warfare is necessary, since it always involves the taking of lives, the erasure of Tselem Elohim, of the image of God, from being, then it is never just and never moral. The purveyor of death is forever corrupted by just the association, touched by death in violence, and precluded from constructing the house of life and peace. These days, our people are awash in blood. The blood of the Jews massacred on October 7th, and the blood of the myriad Palestinians killed in the effort to destroy evil, Hamas. And we are demoralized, on the edge of hopelessness, because we cannot see a way out. Peace seems to be not only remote, but an impossibility. What can we do? We're asking ourselves. Is there a future to our beloved Israel? Palestine and Israel, side by side, can that become a reality? Is coexistence even conceivable? I, like you all, have been struggling with these doubts, skeptical regarding any future reconciliation. You'll be surprised where I found a glimmer of light, a scintilla of optimism. Back in the gym. While on the treadmill, it's really, it can grow a lot. While on the treadmill, I listened to the Haaretz podcast, an interview with Brona Hines, who helped create the Women's Coalition that played a key role in the Good Friday Agreement that brought peace to Northern Ireland. She was in Israel conducting meetings with women's groups, Jewish and Palestinian, who were working for coexistence. And she brought to bear the perspective of a warrior for peace, who had assisted in engineering a solution to a 500-year-old conflict. She described the impact of civil society groups that worked at changing attitudes through dialogue, joint protests, and political action, basically keeping the conversation going, talking, modeling cooperation and mutual respect. And she marveled at the resilience of civil society in Israel. This allowed her to express hope in the future. She gave me a boost. I was uplifted. And I was further uplifted when I read the description of a new documentary entitled The Other, whose filming had begun before October 7th. The Israeli director reported that nevertheless, not one Palestinian asked to pull their footage from the film because they were so intensely committed to the importance of the message of embracing the other, even in the midst of their grief. The first joint board meeting of Eretz Kulam that was mentioned by Rabbi Matalon, right, was scheduled for October the 10th. Joint Israeli, Jewish, Palestinian board meeting, October 10th. And it took place because people know we must do everything to work towards a future. Among those profiled in the film, The Other, is Ahmed Hebu, an ex-Hamasnik who lost 60 members of his family in Gaza's devastating destruction and who turned peace activist, and fellow peace seeker Maoz Inon, whose parents were both murdered on October 7th. My friends, dare we give up? How can we afford the luxury of hopeless paralysis? How can we betray Ahmed and Maoz? We must make sure that the conversation, the peace conversation, persists and is sustained across boundaries. Vivian Silver, Aleha HaShalom, Vivian Silver's son, is looking to us. Hirsch's parents and the Shohams are looking to us. Mai Pundak and Rula Hardal, the co-directors of A Land for All, are looking to us. They have a justifiable claim on us and are calling to us. Yidden, Jews, al titya'ashu, asur lehitya'ish. Despair is prohibited. Al titya'ashu. For their sake, for the sake of Zion, Lema'an Tzion, for the sake of the Palestinian people, despite the grim reality, for all, we cannot and will not remain silent and inactive. Seek out dialogue groups support coexistence efforts on the ground, and follow the example of your rabbis. King David and Pope Francis have challenged us to build a house of life without any more senseless bloodshed. And some early Zionist dreamer insisted that if you will it, it is not a dream. Fellow travelers, will it with all your hearts and all your being and all your strength. It is not a dream. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu.